David Walker, the recently retired comptroller of the U.S. and a personal hero of mine, said of the U.S. government, "Its financial position is worse than advertised. It has a broken business model. It faces deficits in its budget, its balance of payments, its savings, and its leadership." Wow, those are some pretty strong words. In my assessment, he's absolutely right. And here's some data to support that. This is a table taken right from the U.S. government annual report found on the Treasury Department website. Again, we are going to be looking at NPV numbers. The first is a nearly $9 trillion shortfall representing the total U.S. government net position, without including Social Security and Medicare. Again, this means that all U.S. government cash inflows, plus the value of all government assets, would have to be offset against known outlays to determine that, today, the U.S. government would have to somehow obtain $8.9 trillion to balance its liabilities against its assets. But that's not even the 1/5 of it. Once we add in Social Security and Medicare, the shortfall suddenly balloons to $53 trillion by the Treasury Department's own calculations. Whoa, stop right there. That's more than 4 times GDP. This means that the U.S. government is insolvent. Why is this not topic number 1 on the presidential campaign trail? A country this far in hock has some real future issues and is potentially on its way to bankruptcy. In case you are harboring the notion that there's some money socked away in a special U.S. government account, like a lockbox, this picture shows George Bush standing next to the entire Social Security trust fund. Yep, there it is. The entire trust fund is a 3-ring binder with slips of paper in it saying that the U.S. government has spent all the money and replaced it with special Treasury bonds. Hold on there. Aren't Treasury bonds an obligation of the U.S. government? How can the government owe itself money? It can't. All government revenue either comes from taxpayers or borrowing. So when the time comes to pay off those special bonds, that money will either come from taxpayers or additional borrowing. If it were possible to owe money to yourself and pay interest to boot, then we could all become fabulously wealthy by writing ourselves checks. But, of course, this is a foolish, easily dispelled notion. At any rate, depending on which government agency's numbers you use, the federal shortfall is anywhere from $53 trillion to $85 trillion. This number is so large that it even scares small monkeys. And proving the point that you cannot grow your way out of an NPV shortfall, this number has grown by nearly $40 trillion over the past 10 years, advancing during both strong and weak economic times. And finally, saving is related to investing. And according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, we've fallen short there as well. In 2005, they assessed the condition of 12 categories of infrastructure, including bridges, roadways, drinking water systems, and wastewater treatment plants. They gave the U.S. an overall grade of D and calculated that $1.6 trillion would be needed over the next 5 years to bring us back up to first world standards. Since that was in 2005, and inflation for things made out of metal and asphalt has advanced enormously since then, let's just round that up to, say, an even $2 trillion. Putting it all together, we find that a personal failure to save is reflected by a state and local failure to save, which are themselves mirrored by a corporate failure to save, all dwarfed by a failure to save at the federal government level. And capping it all off is a profound failure to invest. All of these deficits lie before us and lead me to conclude that the next 20 years are going to be completely unlike the last 20 years. This is our legacy, the economic and physical world that we are choosing to leave to those who follow us. How did we get here? How did this happen? Next, we move on to assets to see how they stack up against our debts and our national failure to save.